Take a deep breath, take the higher road. That's what they always say, as if they know the way. They won't take it from me. But don't ever doubt yourself, 'cause life ain't just a dream. You make your own, so kick and scream. The people will act with a never-ending force. You never had the chance, so what you waiting for? The day has come, my friend, 'cause this is war. It's time and this is war.
Something is happening in the skies that most passengers never hear about until it makes headlines. Over the past several years, stories of pilot incapacitations have been surfacing at an unusual and alarming rate. And while aviation has always had rigorous standards to protect against these scenarios, the timing of this reported increase has drawn serious concern. Following the mass rollout of the COVID-19 mRNA jabs, more pilots began reporting sudden cardiac symptoms, neurological events, and other health complications, sometimes in the cockpit itself. While the aviation community debates whether this represents a true rise or simply more visible reporting, one fact is clear. Even one incapacitated pilot in flight is one too many. At stake is more than statistics. It's trust. Trust that the systems in place to safeguard public travel are being upheld with full transparency. Are regulators and airlines being honest about medical events in the cockpit? Have medical standards shifted to quietly accommodate risk? And how are pilots, many of whom face the career-ending consequences of disclosure, supposed to come forward without fear of retribution? In this episode, we are pulling back the curtain and examining what the FAA and airlines are or are not saying, and what solutions could restore confidence for both pilots and passengers. This conversation is not about fueling panic. It's about asking the right questions before small cracks become dangerous fault lines in aviation safety. Because when you step onto a plane, you deserve to know that everyone in the cockpit is truly fit to fly. You're listening to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Before we get started today, I do want to encourage our listeners, if you have questions or comments, or perhaps you want to share your own experiences with what you're seeing on the front lines of healthcare, you can now submit those to us directly by visiting our website at nursesoutloud.com. We would love to hear from you. We encourage all of you to engage in the battle and find your voice in this fight. But until you are able to do that, we will continue to be that voice for you. Today, we're talking about aviation safety, pilot health, and the systems meant to protect every passenger. My guest, Dr. Kevin Stillwagon, was first licensed as a chiropractor in 1980. Just a few years later, in 1984, he self-published a book addressing medical freedom and the dangers of vaccines, an issue that has remained at the center of his life's work. In 1987, he embarked on a second career as an airline pilot, where he served for more than 3 decades until 2020, when he was forced into retirement for refusing to wear a face mask as part of his uniform. Since that time, Dr. Stillwagon has become a powerful voice speaking out against mask and vaccine mandates. He has addressed school boards, county commissioners, and freedom rallies across the country, and has been a guest on numerous podcasts and radio programs. His expertise as both a healthcare professional and pilot has made him a leading commentator on how mandated medical interventions, particularly the COVID-19 shots, have affected flight safety. He also serves as vice president of U.S. Freedom Flyers, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that advocates for medical choice and transparency in aviation. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on, Kimberly, for this very important conversation.
Absolutely. It is a very important conversation that not enough people are having. But for any of my listeners who may not be familiar with your work, if you can give me the just very short version, your background, what U.S. Freedom Flyers does, and what your role is as VP.
Yeah, well, you kind of already mentioned that I was a chiropractor, and I practiced full-time for about 7 years, and I wasn't really following my bliss
Yeah.
It wasn't something that I really enjoyed. I had also been a private pilot ever since I was 15 years old. And, flying for me is just absolute enjoyment. And so I had the opportunity to switch careers in 1987, which I did. And so that put me into the cockpit with having, a medical background. So clearly, I can make opinions on what's happened in aviation safety indicators and signals over the years. And I can tie this directly to what's happened with the illegal mandate of the COVID-19 shot that went into pilots and flight attendants, air traffic controllers, mechanics, uh, all people involved in aviation safety have been impacted by this, and I can start to see some signals that are starting to appear. And this happened right in 2021, right after the mandate of the shot, and the shot started going into pilots and flight crews. Clearly, I can see these signals. So you mentioned that I'm involved with usfreedomflyers.org. That organization is basically an FAA watchdog that is concerned about pilot health and also about medical standards for pilots and how these issues are being reported or not reported to the FAA and also to the National Transportation Safety Board, two entities that are supposed to be monitoring signals for aviation safety problems, and they've dropped the ball. I found that there was something called a pilot incapacitation data registry, abbreviated IDR, that has been in force since 1993 to keep track of pilot incapacitations and make sure that these incapacitations are investigated by the National Transportation Safety Board. But in the year 2022, for some reason, the FAA decided to discontinue that database. So that leaves us in a situation right now where there is no centralized method of collecting pilot incapacitation data and tying this to any safety signals. That's a problem. This is
And
something that
it's very telling, right? I mean, the
yeah.
timing, looking at the timing of that 2022, was any rationale given for discontinuing that program?
Yeah, they said there was no funding and personnel to support it. I think that's a false statement. They also said that there were voluntary reporting issues and variations in how different operators documented these incidences, and that led to gaps and inconsistencies. Now, that may be true because there is no standardized method of collecting this data. Um, the incapacitation data registry did collect the data, but there was really no guidelines for airlines on how to report this information. And so they said that they were going to shift to a more integrated and comprehensive approach to data collection and analysis and try to partner with airlines and unions to make this happen. But it has not happened.
Yeah.
And and so that's a problem. So, I started looking into data on my own. What got me into it was something that was published shortly after the vaccines rolled out that said that there was an increase in pilot deaths overall by almost 1,700%. And I knew that there was no truth in that. I figured out where they got that information from. It was in something called the Airline Pilots Association magazine. ALPA is a pilot union. Not all airlines have their pilots belong to ALPA, but some of the major airlines do, including United Airlines and also Delta Airlines. That was my former employer. Those are the two big ones. And so the ALPA magazine monthly has a section called In Memoriam, where they recognize pilots that had flown for ALPA carriers that had passed away. And they publish this on a monthly basis, but it's not cumulative. The reports come out sporadically based on how and when a pilot's family member decided that they wanted to honor the pilot in the magazine. So the way it's published, it can look like there's a spike in deaths just based on how and when they print this information. So it became clear to me that somebody needed to collect all of the in memoriam publications that were made over the years on a monthly basis, starting before the COVID shot was mandated. So I did that. And I started tracking all of the deaths cumulatively that were reported since the year 2019, and I have kept that active up to the present time. And clearly, I could see that in 2021, there was a very slight increase in the numbers of pilots that have died, but it wasn't statistically significant. But what I did find was there was a 40% increase in the incidence of pilots dying younger, which means prior to the normal retirement age of 65. That was a 40% increase, which aligned perfectly with some information that Ed Dowd had collected from actuarial data in insurance companies nationwide. So definitely a correlation there. And I also started looking into pilot disability claims that had been filed against the airlines, pilots going out on early long-term disability. And in major airlines like Delta and United, and also Southwest Airlines, who is not an ALPA carrier. They have their own union, but they did publish data showing that there was a 300% increase, three times the amount of pilots going out on early disability. And this started happening also in the year 2021. And some of these disabling things that can happen to pilots include things like heart problems, problems that show up in their EKGs that are required for pilots to get, also neurological problems and chronic illnesses and cancers that just kind of come up out of nowhere. And clearly, all of these things are definitely tied to adverse reactions of these mRNA injections. And we could get into the physiology of why that is, but clearly the data is there and it does line up directly with the illegal mandate of this shot that went into pilots. And, people ask me, well, why was it illegal? Well, it was illegal because if you look in the recommendations that are published, that comes out of the FAA, and it's given to all aeromedical examiners, it states in there that you cannot administer any experimental product to a pilot, even after a drug, for example, is FDA approved. They have to wait a full year before pilots are allowed to take these products to be in command of an aircraft. And the reason is because, and you know this, Kimberly, whenever a drug is FDA approved, it goes through safety trials, but the safety trials are not robust and long enough to see what the real outcome is. The real outcome always shows up in what's called post-marketing experience. What happens to people after millions of these doses start going into people? Not just the thousands that they look for in these safety trials, but millions of people. This is all post-marketing evidence, and it shows up in databases like the VAERS system, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. It also shows up in healthcare records through HMOs, Medicare records, things like that. These things start to show up, and what they look for is any type of an adverse reaction that could affect safety of flight in a pilot. And if they find something like that, then these drugs get put on what's called a no-fly list. If pilots are taking these products, they are not allowed to be in command of an aircraft. So clearly, this mRNA shot that was mandated to go into pilots at some airlines, not all airlines mandated it, but many did. Uh, Clearly, it was an experimental product, and this should not have been allowed to happen. The only restriction they put on it, Kimberly, was when you got the shot, you had to wait 48 hours to see if you had any adverse reaction.
And
And
speaking of that 48-hour period, there, I'm sure you're familiar with Cody Flint. Wasn't
yes,
his situation like he tried to fly the plane was 48 hours. He waited the 48 hours
mhm.
following his vaccination. I believe it was maybe right at that 48-hour mark, and then he had an adverse reaction and doesn't even remember landing the plane. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's absolutely correct. Cody Flint has been very, very outspoken on what
Mhm.
happened to him after he took one of these products. And this is a unique opportunity right now to talk about uh, Cody Flint's experience compared to his wife's experience. They both went out and got the shot on the same day, and it came from the same batch. And I believe it also came from the same vial. Cody had that extreme adverse reaction that affected his neurological system literally at his brainstem. And it happened very shortly after the 48-hour waiting time, which he did adhere to. His wife had absolutely no adverse reaction whatsoever. So we have to ask ourselves, how can this possibly happen? Well, it's because there's no standardized delivery system for these products. They shove the needle in you and push the product in. None of this is standardized. And you've watched these needles go in, and you've watched some of the vaccine administrators push the plunger, right? They do it at varied speeds. They don't aspirate the needle to see
You know,
if
they don't
it's
make them do that anymore. Do you know that?
no,
Yeah, they don't
I know.
aspirate anymore because I'm kind of old school. I've been injecting for a long time, and I always aspirate still to this day. And newer nurses, they're not taught to aspirate any longer.
No, they're not. They're not taught to aspirate at all. And so the danger there is the tip of the needle could be resting directly in a vessel.
Yeah.
If it's on the arterial side, what happens is the product will start to disseminate out away from the heart. But if it's on the venous side, then it's going to be immediately pulled in directly back to the heart through the vena cava, out into the lungs, back to the heart, and then it starts to distribute from there, into the brain and other parts of the body. So it all depends upon where the tip of the needle was and, where does this stuff go? So obviously it was different for Cody and his wife, who got the same product from the same vial from the same batch. Yeah, this is a problem. There's no standardization there, and there never has been. And
And I
and
think it
that
speaks to, Kevin, to, that we are all made differently. Like we can't have these one size fits all protocols because the physiological makeup of one individual is completely different from the next individual. And the way you react to something may not be the way I react to something. And that's,
that's exactly right.
I think
That's
that's
a
the danger right there
Yeah,
of doing this, the like Joe Biden's campaign of a shot in every arm. To me,
yeah.
that was just incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, it is. And, there's another aspect to this mRNA shot that nobody really wants to talk about, but I will. Um, if you look at the records of the deaths that occurred after these shots, over 1,000 people died right in the vaccine center, right after they got administered this shot. And you got to ask yourself, how in the world could that possibly happen? Well, the reason is because this product is in what are called lipid nanoparticles. They're fat bubbles. And fat bubbles tend to coagulate. They tend to stick together. And if you look at the package insert that's given to the vaccine administrators, they are instructed 3 times to look at the vial and look at the syringe at different times. And they're instructed to not shake this stuff. They're not supposed to shake it. Some of these vaccine administrators have been shaking the stuff before they pull it into the syringe and then shove it into the body. Well, what happens is they they know that these lipid nanoparticles can stick together and form fat globules. And if you inject that stuff into your body and it does get into the venous system, you're going to create an embolism that can create a deadly heart attack because of blockage of coronary arteries or even a deadly stroke in the brain. And it's going to happen within a matter of minutes or less than an hour. And that's exactly what I think happened to some of these people. It's extremely dangerous.
I couldn't
And
understand. There was that one, I can't remember where it happened, but this woman that got received her vaccine, and then at the pharmacy, she died within that 15-minute waiting period, and
yeah,
people were still lined up and still going to get their shots after they just watched somebody
yeah. And
collapse and
what
die,
the
and I just can't understand it.
yeah, what does that say about our society?
Mhm.
The There's something seriously wrong when people are that frightened over experiencing contact with a virus, something that you can't even see with a naked eye. People are so afraid of that that they're willing to stand in line and get an experimental procedure done to them, even if somebody dies
Yeah,
in full view.
I could never understand it. And as when I was nursing, I was an ICU nurse. I worked all through the height of COVID. And interestingly, now I know I was seeing in the ICU what I'm certain now were COVID patients as far back that I can remember, probably September 2019.
Yeah,
As we know, March 2020 is when it all kind of, we were seeing these patients present with ARDS. They presented very differently than what we were used to. We were seeing them require mechanical ventilation much longer at much higher rates. So something was definitely different about these patients. Now, if you remember at that time, of course, we're not wearing masks because, none of this stuff had come about.
right,
So I'm not wearing masks or anything like that. I'm just the regular PPE. And interestingly, it took me 2.5 years. It was not until 2022 that I actually contracted COVID.
right.
So,
Well, see, here's the thing that most people do not understand, including a lot of doctors don't understand this either. You can come in contact with these organisms like the SARS-CoV-2 virus that are associated with COVID-like symptoms. You can come in contact with these viruses and not even know it.
mhm,
You can be completely asymptomatic and have built a robust immune response against whatever it is. And the reason is because your exposure always comes through what's called the epithelial barrier. And that's what separates the inside of you from the outside. And so these linings exist, of course, in the mouth and the gut lining. They also exist in the nasal passages and all of the respiratory tract. They also exist in the genitourinary tract and also in your ears, in your eustachian tubes, also in the linings of your eyes. So any of these surfaces are exposed to the external environment. So these things that are out there, whatever you want to call them, viruses, bacteria, fungi, spores, parasites, anything, that's where the contact happens. And if you've got a weakening of that lining, then you can have these organisms get inside the body, and that's when you are infected. But we have mechanisms to stop that from happening. These are part of what's called the innate immune system that we were all born with, and it works perfectly well. We've got natural uh, 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 little hairs that are in that mucosal lining that continuously sweep those organisms back out so that they can be coughed or sneezed out, hopefully into something that you throw away,
Right.
not to a rag that's strapped to your face all day. Because,
That you breathe in. Yeah.
well, yeah, and people said, well,
So,
the mask collects droplets. Well, of course it
yeah.
does, and that's the problem
It turns it
because
into a
you're
little petri dish on your face.
exactly. You're making yourself about 15 times more likely to develop an upper respiratory infection of any kind, simply because you're constantly re-exposing yourself to that. So, that was one of the reasons why I absolutely would never, ever put a mask on my face. I just would not do it.
Well, the science was never there
Yeah.
anyway. All you need to do is Google the size of the virus and then the size of
Yeah,
the fibers of the
exactly.
mask. So we
Yeah.
knew, from the get-go, it was really about control versus any real science behind that masking. It was actually negative efficacy.
No, there was no science there whatsoever. And so, I'm talking about how, these foreign entities get inside the body. Well, they got to come through that barrier in a natural way. And the way that does that is they have receptors on these organisms that attach to receptors that are on that epithelial barrier. And the instant that happens, our immune system is alerted through what are called toll-like receptors. And they start sending signals to other immune cells, and they're alerted that something's attached to the barrier. And at this point, our immune system can decide to reject that thing, not let it gain entry into the body. And so if you've got natural immunity, that's what happens. It doesn't even affect you. It's stopped right there at the barrier. If you don't have that protection, then the next thing happens. And what happens is the genetic information that's inside of the virus gets pulled into the cell that makes up that barrier. And some people think that, these viruses are nasty organisms and they're out to get you and they're out to kill you. No, they are
Hmm.
not even living things. They are basically genetic material that's encapsulated in what's called a lipid shell, or a shell that's made of lipids and proteins. It's not alive. It doesn't have any intelligence, no desire to attack you, no ability to reproduce. It can't do anything. It's just a genetic package of material. And I know there's people that are listening to this right now that don't believe that viruses even exist. But I can tell you that they most certainly do.
Mhm.
They're made in laboratories. And, the pharmaceutical industry has been doing this for decades.
Okay.
They create these things in laboratory environments. They use human fetal cells to reproduce these things. That's what's going into the vial, and that's what's getting injected into you. So, yeah, they most certainly do exist. So, back to the natural exposure, once that virus is inside of the cell, then what happens is the cell will start to make copies of the virus. And when that happens, there's a system whereby the cell will purposefully display what it's making on its surface. so that it can show that to other cells, other immune cells that are in the body. These are called cytotoxic T cells. And if the cytotoxic T cell recognizes that the cell is making something that is not self, in other words, it's making a virus, or maybe it's making something that it was told to make by messenger RNA that was injected into the body, it will stop that from happening. It will take those cells out. And the cells are on the epithelial barrier where we have an abundance of what are called stem cells or progenitor cells. And what happens is these cells are naturally destroyed by the immune system gently. Sometimes you don't even know it's happening, and they're replaced almost immediately with new ones. And if your immune system is working correctly, the way it should be working, this all happens. You don't even know it, and you never get a symptom. But you have developed natural immunity that will stay with you for the rest of your life.
You know, and
What you've,
I consider you an expert on immunology, on the immune system, all of that.
yeah,
So I think when we're thinking about what the issue was with these mRNA shots, and I think the biggest problem was that we had an immune refocusing when we're introducing
yeah,
all of these things, and now we are completely focused on producing that spike protein, and it's leaving everybody just susceptible to pretty much every other virus known to man because we're focused clearly on that one. Is that correct? Am I
that's
understanding that
absolute.
correctly?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, what you just mentioned there. And, people say they want to follow the science.
Mm.
Okay, well, what does the science say? The science says that if you inject something into the body, ignoring the epithelial barrier that we just talked about, you will get antibody production. That is absolutely true. You will get antibody production. But these are serum antibodies. They are deep inside of your body. They are reactive to infections. They cannot prevent the infection from happening. They cannot stop something from coming through that epithelial barrier, nor can they stop the replications that happen at the epithelial barrier. Can't do it. It's impossible. And that's exactly why, and it took a while, but Fauci finally admitted it. Yeah, you can get these shots and it will not stop the infection from happening, nor will it stop the infection from spreading.
Yeah,
Why? I
that's what
just
I've seen.
explained the reason why. Because
Yeah.
all of those protections are on or in the epithelial barrier. So, what have you done? You've injected yourself with something that's deep inside the body, cannot prevent that from happening, but it's creating a serum antibody. Well, a little more on the science, and you mentioned this. Because you're creating a serum antibody now, what you're doing is you're training those T cells that we just talked about that are guarding that epithelial barrier. You have trained those T cells to look for what? To look for
Right.
exactly what you just got injected with,
Yep.
not what's actually circulating between people and is hitting your epithelial barrier. You see? And
It
you
seems so
you you
simple.
you used the right words. You said you refocused. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. It's a refocusing that's happening. So let's get into a little more of the
Well, I'll
science.
tell you what, Kevin, I'm up against a hard break, but when we come back, we're gonna jump right back into that spot. So hold that thought there for me just a moment.
Sure.
America Out Loud Talk Radio plays on the iHeartRadio network. You can also listen on our media player from any web browser anywhere in the world. We have the best in-class apps available on Apple, Android, or Alexa 24/7. Great talk radio. All of our shows go to podcast the following day. You can hear them on apps such as Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeart Podcast, and many more. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show on Apple Podcasts for me. Don't forget to check out our online store at americaoutloud.shop, where you can find all of the products that we represent on our network at a discounted rate, including an incredible line of products from Chemical Free Body. Unlike the majority of supplements you'll find on the market today with Chemical Free Body, you won't have to worry about harmful ingredients, binders, fillers, or flow agents. Their ultra-safe breakthrough nanosilver technology destroys pathogens, balances the microbiome, and boosts immunity. All of these products are proudly made in the USA and are backed by an unheard of double your money back guarantee. I've made a twice daily green 85 drink part of my routine, which has led to a decrease in belly bloat and an increase in energy throughout the day. Use promo code OUTLOUD to save 20% off the Healthy Gut Bundle. I'll catch you on this side of this break. Stay with us.
Feeling off lately? Bloated, brain fog, low energy? It could be parasites, these silent invaders that weaken your gut, immune system, and mental clarity. That's why Dr. Peter McCullough and the doctors at the Wellness Company formulated ivermectin and mebendazole cleanse, a medical-grade solution designed to help eliminate parasites and restore balance. No gimmicks, just real medicine trusted by top doctors. Go to twc.health/outloud and use code OUTLOUD for 20% off your first order. Take control of your health today.
You wouldn't go a day without brushing your teeth or washing your hands. What about washing your nose? I mean, your nose does filter the air you breathe, air loaded with bacteria, viruses, and irritants. Make nasal hygiene part of your routine with Clear. No messy bottles to fill, no drowning sensation. Clear is a natural drug-free saline with the added benefit of xylitol, which blocks bacterial and viral adhesion. Available in stores and online at clear.com. That is XLEAR.com.
Struggling with your health, energy, and constantly feeling hungry? Want to save money on the rising cost of groceries and dramatically improve your health? Go to chemicalfreebody.com/outloud today. Get nature's super multivitamin, doctor-formulated Green 85 juice formula. Empower your immune system, cut your grocery bill, and save 20% on your first order.
Well, did you see Google quietly updated its AI principles, removing its pledge not to use AI for weapons or surveillance, a promise they agreed to in 2018? Well, the American people have seen Google's track record, prompting the question, is Google an untrustworthy player in the AI race? Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news. Liberty and justice for all.
Welcome back to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Wherever you're listening from today and whatever you're doing, I thank you for giving me the gift of your time. Be sure to make AmericaOutloud.news your daily stop for all the latest news and happenings. We all must do our part and share the stories, the articles, the podcasts, and videos so we can help secure America's future. If you're just joining us, I have been talking with chiropractor, retired airline pilot, and vice president of U.S. Freedom Flyers, Dr. Kevin Stillwagon. Kevin, thanks again for being here. And I hated to cut you off there because you were on such a roll. So let's jump right back in there.
Yeah, so I kind of do get on a roll with the science.
Yeah, the science will keep going and going.
Yeah, it does. And so, more on the science. When you ignore that epithelial barrier and you inject something deep inside the body, particularly these mRNA shots, what you've done is you've injected the message to make a foreign protein. And it's not on the epithelial barrier. You've bypassed that. So where a normal infection happens, and these cells are making foreign proteins, they get taken out and replaced quite quickly. Sometimes, as I mentioned, you don't even know it happened. You never get a symptom. But when you inject this stuff inside of your body, now you're telling cells that are part of your blood vessel linings, and also cells that are organ tissues to make these proteins. And those cells are going to get taken out too. But the problem is, Kimberly, they don't have that stem cell and progenitor cell supply that I talked about that exists on the epithelial barrier. It's not there. And so when you lose these cells, you have tissue destruction that is going to create pathology. So if it affects the vascular lining, which it does, because that's the first contact that these lipid nanoparticles are going to come in contact with, And, the cells start making these proteins, you're going to have tissue loss all along the vascular system. This is going to create weakening of vascular walls, which can lead to what's called microhemorrhaging. And if this happens in the brain, then you're going to get little things called transient, like little microhemorrhages, which can affect your ability to think properly, your reaction times, things of that nature. So you don't want this happening to pilots when they're flying an airplane.
Certainly
If
not.
it happens in the heart, then you're going to have tissue loss in the myocardial cells that make up the heart lining. And those are going to get damaged. They're not going to be replaced at all. It leaves a permanent scar. This can affect the electrical signaling in the heart. And the first indication that you're going to have that you've got this going on is going to be sudden cardiac failure because there's no symptoms. This is what's called subclinical myocarditis. This is what's so dangerous. You see, you don't
And by
want.
the way, subclinical myocarditis is not detectable on an EKG. And I think that's important for people to understand because
Yeah.
pilots will get their EKG and taking it back to student athletes, the same thing. They go and they check their box of getting their EKG done and they say, okay, you're good to go. But an EKG is not going to capture subclinical myocarditis.
That's absolutely true. And so there are more invasive tests that need to be done to determine if pilots are having this problem of subclinical myocarditis. And so, one of the solutions that we have to look at here is what kind of testing can we do? And well, we know for sure that the manufacture of the spike protein is going to cause this tissue loss. And so the way we measure that is looking for excess antibodies against the spike protein. And if we see that happening, then we can assume that there's excess spike protein production. And so we start to look a little closer at the heart. Maybe we do some echocardiograms or things of that nature to see if there's any swelling that's going on in the heart. So yeah, this is a big deal. Um, so that's just one thing that can happen. Another thing that can happen with this spike protein production is the spike protein is sticky, and it can cause red blood cells to start clumping together. And when that happens, then you get little blockages in the vascular system. So whatever is on the other end of that capillary, that organ tissue is going to suffer. It's not going to get the proper amount of oxygen. It's not going to get the nutrients, and it's not going to be able to get rid of the waste products. So what's that do? Well, now you get what's called transient ischemic attacks, which are like little mini strokes that can happen in the brain. This can affect pilots in a bad way with temporary loss of vision, temporary loss of ability to concentrate, temporary loss of the ability to even recognize what they're supposed to be doing at the current time. This is very, very dangerous. We don't need these things happening to pilots. So,
It really and truly is, and I think it's frightening. It's certainly been on my radar since around the time when they started mandating 2020, 2021, that the majority of airline pilots, and thank God for U.S. freedom flyers for stepping in and what this organization has done. I'm so grateful because what they cannot push on their employees, they cannot pass on to the passengers. So I think that had U.S. freedom flyers not stepped in when they did, there's a very high likelihood that we would have all been mandated to be vaccinated.
yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm
It
very
was
grateful for you doing that.
definitely headed that direction. And luckily it got stopped. In fact, the FAA has to be recertified by Congress every 5 years. And this just happened last year. And in their recertification, Congress told the FAA that you are not allowed to mandate the COVID shot for any crew member nor any passenger, nor are you allowed to mandate mask wear.
Mhm.
So that got in there, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
but it needs to go a little further. They need to prohibit the mandate of any mRNA injection.
Yes. 'Cause now the new
It,
cancer vaccines are coming out, where
yeah,
they're, which is ridiculous to me, but how people don't recognize, I mean, cancer is $1 billion industry,
yeah,
the standard of care, chemo, radiation, surgery, and now, these, what they'll be hailing as miraculous mRNA vaccines that are going to be used for both preventative and what they're calling, quote unquote, a cure for cancer. And this could become devastating because if there's one thing that frightens people more than maybe even COVID, it's cancer.
yeah. But what people don't realize is that you're instructing cells of the body, normal
Mhm.
cells of the body, to make a foreign protein.
Yeah.
And whenever that happens, that kicks off your immune system to destroy those cells. And I got to drill this home again. If it happens on the epithelial barrier where you naturally come in contact with things, that's not a big deal. But when you inject this stuff, it is a big deal because you don't know where it's going to go. It basically goes everywhere.
Oh,
And
those
that's the
lipid
way that,
nanoparticles, they just slip under everything. They slip under all the
yeah,
door cracks.
yeah, and that's why they designed it that way. They used a lipid shell that's made of normal body proteins, uh, cholesterol and DSPC. I'm sorry, I keep saying proteins. They're made of normal body fats or lipids, and those are cholesterol and DSPC. And they did it that way because knowing that when you inject this stuff, the body is not going to immediately reject it. It will go anywhere and everywhere, and these lipid nanoparticles will merge with any cell that they come in contact with because it's made of exactly the same materials. And that's how the messenger RNA that's inside gets delivered. And, you know, I got to mention, mRNA is natural in the body. That's how we normally make proteins. We're all born with DNA from our parents, and that's where the messages are to make the proteins that we need to build our bodies and perform normal daily functions. That's how it works. That's how the body makes proteins through natural messenger RNA that's actually constructed within the nucleus of the cell. But what they've done with this shot is that they've used what's called a modified mRNA. They used synthetic stuff in there instead of the natural uh, components that are inside of the human body. Instead of using a uridine, which is the natural substance in the body, they used N1-methyl pseudouridine. And they did that for two reasons. Number one, it lasts a really, really long time so that it can keep making the protein so that they can get that antibody that they're looking for that doesn't do anything anyway. And the second reason is because it evades the toll-like receptors that I talked about. It's part of your innate immune system. We have toll-like receptors, specifically numbers 3, 7, and 8, that can detect abnormal mRNA that's in the body. And when they find it, then they stop that protein production. They don't even let it happen. But the two people that designed this N1-methyl pseudouridine were Carrico and Wiseman, and they got Nobel Prizes for doing that, simply because they figured out a way to trick the body into making foreign proteins without having the body stop the process.
I mean, just just on its face when you were talking about creating foreign proteins or introducing foreign proteins into the body, like we are very perfectly, wonderfully made. We have such
Yeah.
intelligent design, and I don't know when we are going to stop trying to think we are better than God. Our design is perfect
It is
as
it
is.
is it is perfect, and you just mentioned something else. You said injecting foreign proteins. Well, that's a traditional shot.
Yeah,
They're injecting
all
the
of them. Yeah.
foreign protein, and they always inject the weaponized part. It's the part that has to attach to cellular receptors. People ask me all the time, well, why don't they just inject, a safer part of the virus, like part of the shell? Well, they can't do that because the antibodies that are going to be created against it will not stop the cellular attachment, you see.
Yeah.
And it's the cellular attachment that creates the immune response. So they have to inject the weaponized part. In other words, the part that's biologically active and will attach to cellular receptors. But the problem, Kimberly, and a lot of doctors aren't recognizing this, but they will pretty soon. When you inject that stuff, it takes about 2 weeks for the body to create those antibodies. So what happens in that 2-week waiting period? Well, they're biologically active proteins that you just injected, and they're going to go and attach to cellular receptors, and that is going to create an immune response. And some of these immune responses can be quite severe, including
Well, and
things
the other
like,
problem there is that they were force vaccinating people who were already immune. When did we ever do and consider vaccinating the already immune? That's not anything that we've ever really done before. And now we're going to have the very real threat of a hyperimmune response, which we've seen
yeah,
many times.
I'm really, really glad you brought that up, Kimberly, because we have the technology to measure immunity to
Yeah.
all of the childhood diseases right now. And I'm not talking about measuring the serum antibodies that these shots are designed to make. I'm talking about measuring T cell response and also a very special antibody that exists on the mucosal lining. It's called a secretory IgA antibody
Mhm.
that can only come from a natural exposure, never from an injection. So we have the capability to measure that right now, antigen specific for each and every childhood disease. So what we should be doing is, testing children to see if they already have immunity. And if they do, then they should be absolutely contraindicated from even thinking about injecting something into their body.
And didn't
They
they
don't need it.
exactly? And didn't during the trials, didn't they intentionally remove the already immune from their vaccine trials? If I'm remembering
Yes,
correctly, because they knew that they could possibly die. It was my guess is that they actually removed those people, and that's going to not represent true data because we're actually vaccinating the already immune, but yet you're removing them from the studies.
exactly. Yeah, they test for that in the trials, and that's what kind of loads the trials and tilts them in a certain way.
Hmm.
I hope people can see that. So yeah, these
How they
trials are
can,
not
I
done
don't know.
properly at all. No.
Yeah. I want to ask you, we only have a couple minutes left, but I really, you've been speaking out about medical freedom, vaccine dangers long before most people were even paying attention. You started talking about this even before the National Vaccine Act. In 1984, you published a book
Yeah.
on this topic. So way before, you were way ahead of the curve here.
Yeah.
But what first inspired you to take that stand?
Well, I was never vaccinated as a child, and I decided that when I went to chiropractic college, that I was going to take a really deep dive into immunology and find out exactly where does the protection against infection reside. And I found that it is in the epithelial barrier that we talked about. It has nothing to do with serum antibodies that are created from these shots called vaccines. And in fact, those shots actually destroy the protection that exists on that epithelial barrier. So it's just a bad idea all the way around to inject anything into your
Bad
body.
medicine, right?
Bad medicine,
Yeah,
absolutely.
as they say. And the last question to you, I'm running out of time. I hate when my clock ticks out in front of my face because I have so many more things I could sit here and talk to you forever because you're brilliant. But you've spoken at school boards, at county commissions, at rallies across the country. What do you feel like has been the most impactful or memorable moment of your public appearances? Not to put you on the spot, but just curious.
Uh, most memorable experience, I think, was the initial reaction that I first got when I started speaking out about this. I mean, I wasn't really sure what kind of a reaction I was going to get, but at the first school board meeting, I talked about uh, masking on kids. And I said, it's going to go deeper than this because you're going to try to mandate shots for kids. And I said, when that happens, you're going to hear from me again. And I got a standing ovation. People were clapping. Some people got kicked out of the room. Yeah.
Yeah, you
So,
you are a powerful voice in this conversation. That's why I'm so grateful to you and I have spoken at many events together. In fact, I remember one event in particular. It was in Florida. You spoke directly before me, and I can remember getting up on the stage and being like, "Oh my God, this is going to be a really tough act to follow. Like, please never put me directly after Kevin Stillwagon ever again," because I'm like, "Wow, I mean, you took down the house there." But you're such a powerful, you have such a powerful message. And it's not just your intelligence and your knowledge and your
yeah,
wisdom about these things, but it's the way that you deliver it in such a passionate way that
yeah.
really carries it forward.
Well, that's true. I'm very, very passionate and I've lived it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
how I can speak
You're a
out
living
about it.
testament to you've not had a single vaccine in your life, and
Never.
you're healthy and good condition and good shape, and out here
Yeah,
fighting the good fight. So I'm definitely grateful to have you in this fight and in this world. Thank you so much for all you do.
my pleasure.
I'm going to have you back again too, because we got more to talk about for sure.
Okay.
For sure. But that is all the friends that we have for today, friends. Just remember that we are here on the air 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern with a different nurse host daily. You can also catch the encore at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please be sure to tune in and listen to myself and these courageous nurses. As we walk you through all of these hot topics, we will empower you with information and education. We will advocate and we will stand in the gap for you because we are nurses and this is what we do. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton, and you can find me here every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Until next time, be safe, be well, and God bless. Remember, we are in a war for truth. We are putting out a bounty on the real misinformation and exposing the purveyors of propaganda. No topic is off limits as we shine our lights and expose the darkness.